Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Fantasy Football Hush Reality. I am your host, Greg Romero Wilson, and here we are, folks. It's finally here. It's fantasy football season. It's football season. It's the best time of the year for me. This is what I love absolutely the most. To be honest, to be honest, I sit around thinking about this from the end of from January till now. I'm just kind of sitting around I hope. Anybody want to do a mock draft? Anybody anybody want to? Who you guys tracking? Look at the big trade. And I meant to do a free agency episode because free agency was so crazy. We've never seen a free agent season where two of the very top wide receivers in the league both changed teams without there being it wasn't their contract year. They weren't in free agency. They just forced movement. And then, of course, the Le'Veon Bell situation, where now you have one of the absolute top elite running backs changing teams after sitting out for an unprecedented year. And that sitting out a year has obviously set a very dangerous precedent because now we're sitting on top of two premier running backs in Melvin Gordon and Ezekiel Elliott. My boy Zeke, I'm wearing his shirt today in solidarity because if anybody deserves to get paid, it's absolutely Zeke Elliott. But they're holding out too. And for fantasy owners, after the way Le'Veon Bell burned his owners last year, I don't think there was anyone that drafted Le'Veon Bell in the first round that went on to. I mean, there's probably one or two that went on to win their league, but ultimately it was an uphill battle for sure. And I know that because I remember one year I had the number one overall pick. I picked David Johnson. This was his, after his huge breakout year. And we're going to talk about David Johnson in just a minute. But after his huge breakout year, and I was one of those people that drafted him number one, the PPR points and the running yard and the heavy usage, and then he hurt his hand in 3 minutes into week one, and it ruined my season. It legitimately ruined my season. I never recovered after that. I wasn't able to. I don't know what happened. I just wasn't able to recover. And also, I was working a day job. I was being a writer on this horrible game show, and it ate up all my time, and it made it very difficult for me to commit the requisite amount of time it takes to truly be a fantasy football know-nothing. Before we go any further, number one, this Sunday night, which I think is August 16, maybe? 7? I need to look that up. But Sunday night, Oxnard, the Levity Live in Oxnard, I will be there with Adam Rank from NFL Fantasy Live. I've been doing shows with Adam Rank. Fantasy is, we do half stand-up comedy and then half fantasy football Q&A with the audience. And we just did the Irvine show down the Irvine Improv, and it was so much fun, getting everybody involved, talking fantasy football. He had James Coe come out as a surprise guest. They did a live Danger Zone part of the show. So come out and join us this Sunday night at the Oxnard Levity Live. And then at the end of the month, one of the unique things, I have a comedians league. I have my league of record, which you'll hear me talk about, and then I also have a comedians league. And this year, even though I'm one of those people that has spoken about how I only do 2 leagues because I don't like to be for and against myself all over the place all weekend. But this year, I am creating a 3rd league that unfortunately I'll also be commissioner of. But I'm calling it my Friends and Family League. And it's a lot of old friends that have now kind of spread out across the map that we don't get to communicate as much anymore. And my family members, a couple of my brothers and a cousin that are going to be in there. And so it's going to be a friends, and one of my nephew is going to be in it too. So, it's just going to be a lot of fun. And now, there's some people that, my brother Christopher is going to be in it, and he's never done fantasy football before. So, as you know, when you have a noob in your league, they're the ones that everybody beats up on. So, he'll probably take a pummeling, unless he has the wisdom to auto-draft. Guys, if this is your first time doing fantasy football, auto-draft your team. I wish I had. Because I remember this is a true story. My first season, my first time, all I heard about fantasy football was, you got to have running backs. You got to load up on running backs. So I drafted 12 running backs and no other positions. Like I had nothing. I had no receivers. I just drafted running, and then instead of like trying to trade some people for some I didn't know anything about trades. I then just went to the waiver wire and just started dropping all these good, running backs that I wished I could, because I needed tight ends, I needed a kicker, I needed all these things. So if it's your first time in a league, do yourself a favor. Like when I was working at that horrible game show, I created a writers league there because it was all comedians. So it was like my first comedians league. And Vanessa Graddick auto drafted her team, and she ended up killing the league because it was the year after Todd Gurley had his down sophomore slump and then came back and was a superstar in his third season. And he was drafted in like the fourth round. The auto draft picked him up. Nobody was touching him. Auto draft grabbed him. And so she had like Le'Veon Bell and Todd Gurley that season and basically rocked her way all the way to the championship. Ultimately losing though, and here's something, if you're on an ESPN league, make sure you check the settings for the playoffs. Because what happened that season was, I thought it was a standard, it was like standard, playoff thing. Well, the stupid fucking ESPN standard playoffs is a 2-week playoff, where you have to play each other twice to beat them. That's one problem I have with it. That's fucking stupid. And then it plays into week 17. Also stupid. And the only reason she lost was because both Gurley and Bell got sat in week 17. No championships should ever be played in week 17. If your league ends on week 17, get the fuck out of that league. Okay? That's not a good league. It should never end that way. It should be single game elimination playoffs. There should be a consolation bracket. And guys that are playing in the consolation bracket should absolutely be allowed to get players off the waiver wire, because here we are. We always want guys to compete even if their team's kind of a wash. But then some guys want it, and not just in other leagues I've run into this, where guys are like, hey, you're not even playing in the playoffs. Your games don't count. How can you say that when what you want is for them to stay competitive for all 16 games, regardless of it? You don't want them like, oh, I'm not going to make the playoffs, and down the stretch in games that count towards guys that are in competition to make the playoffs, and they end up going against a team who doesn't even field a full team. Like he leaves bye guys on there or guys that are injured, and he checks out. So if you don't want checked out players, then you can't then, when it comes to their consolation games, be like, well, you can't take anybody off the waiver wire. Your games don't count. Well, they counted last week. Why don't they count this week? Listen, I play to the final bell, to the final whistle blows, okay? And I don't care if I'm in last place, paying for the absolute, just for pride. I'm going to keep playing because I enjoy doing it. And I hate it when people try and make rules like that somehow negate the competitive level at the lower rungs because they had a bad season. I don't think that that's fair, especially when you are trying to encourage involvement, even when your team is tanking, is taking a shitstorm. And that's, and that's the attitude that I have. And this applies for guys that have picked up players off the waiver wire that absolutely could have helped me in my playoff run. But I believe that they have the right to play. And if this is the settings of the draft, and that's why FOB is so great. If you guys aren't doing this, the free agent acquiring bucks, where you basically, FAAB, where basically you're given like a certain amount of money for the year and you have to bid on players. And this kind of eliminates the guys who suck at all the good draft, the waiver wire guys out of the beginning of the season. Because I don't believe that drafting well should be a punishment. And generally it is, because then you don't get to get these guys that explode and reveal themselves as the season goes on. So I love we were doing it in, only one of my leagues has it right now. I may introduce it in my Comedians League, and I think it's the most fair way because it allows guys who see potential, but even though they drafted well, to still invest in those guys and potentially get them and take those risks too. So it's a lot of fun. And guys that don't and wait till the very end, they tend to have more money. And they can pick up guys at the end more easily. But, it becomes an additional strategy to the game. And I love that. So come see us at Oxnard Levity Live. But, my Comedians League, listen to this. That's going to be on August 26th, Monday night, 10 o'clock, the Lab at the Hollywood Improv. Let me just share with you the guys that are in my league. It's just such a great collection of comedians. I love that and I can tell you what, I'm sorry that you don't get to be in this league and get to be part of our text chat on Sunday, because it is, I mean, we got Jay Hollingsworth, Kabir Singh, who's absolutely, this year we've added James Fry, Robert Zapata, we still have Jack Jr., Manny Maldonado, an absolute crusher, who's one of the biggest shit talkers you will ever run into in fantasy football. In fact, sometimes I have to be like, hey, come on, take it down a notch. We're trying to keep this friendly. But he's super cool about it. He's always gets it, and he's just amazing. Dave Williamson, he's been opening up for Bert Kreischer all over the world. Another amazing comic, super funny on Sundays. Who else? Brett Riley, hysterical, and he so just a brilliant comedian, and it's so great to have him on in our league too. And I feel Rene Garcia, hilarious. The guy, no matter, he's one of those guys that just bullets just bounce right off him. You could say something, he just says, no matter what you say to him, he just goes Cowboys, which I love, and I chime right in on. And he and I just recently went to Cowboys training camp up in Oxnard, so it's an amazing show with nothing but absolute crackerjack comedians. And that is on August 26th, Monday night, 10 p.m. If you want to sit in on our draft, we're going to be in the Improv restaurant area at 7 p.m. having the draft. We have our draft first, and then we have our league show, which is usually one of two shows. We then will have another mid-season show where we do it again. But come for our draft show. It's nothing short of spectacular. So let's jump into it. Let's talk about who you're drafting, what you're doing, what's going on. Obviously, RBs, a lot. I think the most question marks of any position. I mean, because while tight end is a very thin position, I don't think there's a lot of question marks necessarily like at the running back position. Now, obviously, everyone is like, oh, the consensus is Saquon Barkley number one, and I don't agree with that. And I don't agree with that because I think of these guys at the top, when you're talking about, Alvin Kamara, Christian McCaffrey, Zeke Elliott, and Saquon Barkley, I think that I don't think Saquon Barkley is in the best situation to succeed. Now, first of all, he's a sophomore running back, which a sophomore slump for running backs is a real thing. There's always one guy. I called it last year. I said it was going to be Leonard Fournette. When he showed up 20 pounds light to preseason, I was like, that's 20 pounds of muscle, because he wasn't exactly fat. So, and sure enough, he couldn't keep it on the field. But again, I think a lot of that, the Bortles situation, I think contributed a great deal to that. But Saquon Barkley is not in a great situation because he's lost the downfield threat in Odell Beckham Jr., who, by the way, I am all in on OBJ this season, and we're going to talk about that in a minute too. So Saquon Barkley doesn't have that deep threat anymore, and in fact, the receivers are dropping like flies over there. They've lost Golden Tate for the first 4 games to suspension. Sterling Shepard has already injured his thumb so far in the offseason. Although he is back and he looks pretty good, maybe it's nothing. But again, I don't like guys with injuries in the preseason. It's always stuff that kind of lingers and affects their entire season. So now on the other side, Evan Ingram, because you got, for tight ends and PPR, you got to throw the ball to somebody. And guess who I think is going to see, yes, Saquon's going to see a lot of short outlet passes, but I think the problem there is it's stacked boxes all season long. They are going to be playing specifically to stop Saquon Barkley. And so yes, the opportunity is there, but I just think it's too easy for defenses to key on him and key on him almost exclusively. So the guy that I think has the best opportunity, Zeke Elliott, unfortunately, and I touched on this moments ago, unfortunately, Zeke Elliott is also in a position where, we have our draft very late. Let me say this. I believe in having your drafts after that third preseason dress rehearsal game because, like one season we had it early and I drafted Jordy Nelson and he got knocked out for the season before the season even started. And that's what happens when you draft early. I don't agree with drafting early. Wait till after the preseason dress rehearsal and then you know who's in and who's out, because we're definitely going to lose somebody else. Kenyon Drake, for example, today went down with a foot thing. If you drafted Kenyon Drake yesterday during ESPN's big marathon, everybody draft a million fucking teams, well, guess what? 100,000 guys lost Kenyon Drake yesterday. So you have to be cognizant of that. So that's why I say wait on this fantasy football thing, the draft, until after that third week. That being said, I think Alvin Kamara is the true number one. I think he's in the absolute best position to succeed, despite the fact that he has, what's his name? The guy that came from Minnesota, the running back, Latavius Murray. Even though Latavius Murray there is undoubtedly going to vulture 1 to 3 touchdowns this season, absolutely. I guarantee you, though, those vultures are going to come after Kamara gets his shot at it. Kamara, they see, even last year with Mark Ingram being more of the hammer runner, the power rusher, they still let Kamara take first crack. And I feel like that's going to be the case most of the time. Kamara will get first crack, and if he doesn't get in there, bring in Murray. But I still think, and here's the difference, because my number 2 would be McCaffrey. And I think the big difference between those two, McCaffrey, while he doesn't have Latavius Murray, he also doesn't have Drew Brees. And, the fact of the matter is Cam Newton, he's just not an incredibly accurate passer, in my opinion, and he's a little too self-involved. And talk about someone who's going to vulture touchdowns. If McCaffrey doesn't hit it, from 20 yards out or 10 yards out, believe me, they get close to the line and he's going to call his own number every single day. I think Cam Newton vultures more touchdowns than Latavius Murray does this season. So, but McCaffrey's my number 2. And then Saquon Barkley, I mean, again, tremendous upside, but I think the stack boxes thing, I think is going to be a big story this season. I think he's going to find himself frustrated. Not every game, and you're not going to hold him down for the entire game. He's like a Zeke Elliott. He is going to bust out. Even if you key on him, even if you send every man you got after him, he is going to break free 1 or 2 times. It's just going to happen per game. So, I mean, he is still going to be amazing, but again, without OBJ there, I think it's going to be a different season for him. Now then, after that, in the 5th position, most people have David Johnson. Do we miss somebody? I feel like, Zeke Elliott. Oh, yeah, and of course, the Zeke situation. I mean, here's the thing. Listen, guys. If Zeke slips to you at 6 or 7 or 8, I don't know how you don't take him. I don't know how you don't take him. And the way, it's not just the contract thing and the specter of the Le'Veon Bell season. It is also, the fact that someone up there is going to take Patrick Mahomes. I said this during our show in Irvine. I said, in every league, there's going to be some dude that drafts Patrick Mahomes in the first round. His ADP is going to be like 6, I think, when all is said and done. Because, guys, and this proved itself out yesterday. I was watching just the ESPN Fantasy Football Marathon, and they had their draft with their people, which included like Damian Woody and Adam Schefter and Diana Rossini and all these people. And Adam Schefter draws number 1 overall. Adam Schefter. And you know who he drafted? Patrick Mahomes. And that's the thing. You got to admit, during the draft this year, people are always like, don't reach for players. And yet the New York Giants, with the number 6 overall pick, drafted a quarterback from Duke, a player no one was talking about. Could have got him probably in the 7th round, 8th round, 10th round. And they used the number 6 overall pick on Daniel Jones. I'll admit, I wanted him to look terrible in preseason. He looked real good in preseason. He may have a real future, and he may prove to be worth number 6, but you did not have to spend number 6 on him. But that just shows you guys who are paid hundreds of thousands of dollars a year will reach for a guy they really want. And to me, that tells you right there. That tells you someone's getting Mahomes. And you know, it might be me. If all the good running backs get taken early, and then OBJ isn't there, you know what? I may do it. I may pull the trigger. But let's talk about the next running back. Now we get into Le'Veon Bell, which he's back, baby. But here's the thing about Le'Veon Bell. Well, I'm all in on Le'Veon Bell. I think he's going to have. I love a running back with something to prove. You know, he's got this thing to prove now because of what happened with the Pittsburgh situation. And then ultimately also he didn't get the money that he felt he deserved. He barely got, a smidge more than he would have gotten if he would have just signed with the Steelers. So ultimately, he's got something to prove. And if you ask me at the end of this season, who is going to be the number one overall running back? If it's not Alvin Kamara, it's going to be Le'Veon Bell. And actually, I'd lean towards Le'Veon Bell because I love a guy with something to prove. And Sam Darnold, and this is creating sleeper opportunity. Robbie Anderson, I think he'll have a good season. And there's another guy, a sleeper pick I'm going to talk about. Their other, Jamison Crowder, I think is going to be a huge sleeper pick because when they try and come after, it's going to open up that passing game. And then when they start hitting Robbie deep and they start hitting Crowder, on the slants, then I think Le'Veon Bell is going to have a heck of a season. But that being said, much like the situation with the Giants, where Saquon is, up against, ostensibly not having weapons down the field, Le'Veon has the weapons down the field in Robbie Anderson and Jamison Crowder. What he doesn't have is a coach that knows what the fuck he's doing. I mean, Adam Gase just ruined Miami. This is one of those things. Remember when Chip Kelly just decimated the Eagles? Remember, he just ruined the Eagles, got rid of all their good players, ran them into the ground, everybody hated it, total upheaval, total disaster. They fire him, and then San Francisco's like, hey, you know what? We want a piece of that. Send that garbage over here. One man's trash is another man's treasure. It was so stupid. And now we're seeing it again with Adam Gase. Not that he isn't a good offensive coordinator, ostensibly he is, but as a head coach, he's done nothing to demonstrate, hey, this guy really knows how to marshal the troops. And I'm afraid that that's what we're going to see with Le'Veon Bell, like just ruined by bad play calling. And that can absolutely happen. And that's why he's not, my number one overall running. I mean, I think at the end of the season, he might be. I think if anybody can overcome bad play calling, it's Le'Veon Bell. But I think he's got a better situation there. But ultimately, if anybody can ruin it, it's Adam Gase. Sorry. But that doesn't mean I still don't believe in him. I absolutely do. And listen, if he's there at the number 8 pick, I'm taking him. Absolutely. Todd Gurley. Todd Gurley. This is a conundrum. This one's weird. And I'll tell you why it's weird. It's weird because, like, on the NFL fantasy app, he's like the number 5 RB. And he's getting drafted, you look at the overall list and he's somewhere like in the 7-8 range. You go to CBS Sports, about the same. Somewhere in the 6 to 8 range of overall players available. Like Devontae Adams sneaks in there. DeAndre Hopkins might sneak in there. But then it's Todd Gurley. But then on the Yahoo app, they have him at like 32. Which just goes to show you, who's an expert here? Who's got the right numbers? Everybody predicts everything, and you can find someone that agrees with you no matter what. And that's why I always say you got to go with your gut. Now listen, let me tell you something, folks. I believe in Todd Gurley. I mean, the guy was fantastic last season. Yes, he was a little bit tough down the stretch of the actual playoffs. And yes, he was not a part. He was a scratch in week 16 of the championships, which was very difficult for owners of Todd Gurley. But the reason you were in that championship game was because of Todd Gurley. Todd Gurley was phenomenal all season long. And, you know, I think you still got to believe in him. And they brought in this other guy, Darrell Henderson, which a lot of people are worried. And I think in the Yahoo experts, they believe that Darrell Henderson is going to really take a lot of reps. Listen, I watched Darrell Henderson. Stats are stats. I believe in the stats, wholeheartedly believe in the stats. I believe in my gut. But what I really believe in the most is the eye test. I believe what I see, especially in sports. And in Darrell Henderson, I didn't see a guy that at the professional level is going to threaten Todd Gurley's job that much. He is going to spell Todd Gurley, absolutely. He may even come in for a few goal line punch-em-ins, but ultimately I didn't see anything I saw his college reel, and it's impressive. But I watched him, now maybe he changes my mind over the next couple of games. But for me, at this point, Todd Gurley ain't going to lose his job or that many snaps to him. And at the end of the day, he's not a threat to Todd Gurley. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying that just yet. He's little more than a handcuff. You get him because of the knees, but that's it. And don't let anybody else jump up and grab him, because there is a lot of hype around him, but I ain't feeling that hype. Zeke and Gordon. Now, Melvin Gordon figures it down into this part of the list. It's, right around 6 or 7. And Gordon, of course, is again, he's running that bell